Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Your Blank What Now podcast. My name is Marcy Nettles, and I am your host, and what a blessing that is to me. I absolutely love highlighting the stories of people that I consider my heroes because they have gone through difficulties in their life and they decided that they weren't going to just stay stuck there, but they were going to do what it needed to be done to be able to step out the other side and have their breakthrough. And not only that, but willing to be vulnerable and sharing their stories so that if you're in a difficult place, then maybe you can get what you need out of their stories to help you move forward, maybe just one step, one step at a time, right? So I have been honored to be able to do this wonderful series, sharing the stories of women that have been suffering with breast implant illness, breast implant associated cancers, and them sharing their stories on where they got into the depths of it and then how they have been struggling, but victorious in walking through their journeys, not just for themselves, but being advocates for all of the other women out there that have boobies and everybody that loves them, right? So today I am especially excited because I have a doctor with me that is going to really kind of share her own experience, but also help us understand all of the underlying emotions and different things that goes into getting implants in the first place and the aftermath. So I am super excited to have Dr. Amanda Savage Brown here with me today. She truly is a torchbearer for women navigating the psychosocial impacts of breast implants. She draws from her life's work in women's health that began while earning a PhD in genetics, continued while working as an officer in the United States Public Health Service, and flourished as a clinical psychotherapist specializing in helping women reclaim their lives through mindful self-acceptance and values-guided change. In 2018, her personal life and professional expertise aligned as she moved through her breast implant removal journey, recovered from disabling pain she didn't realize was related to her body's response to breast implants, and witnessed countless women struggling with the deeply felt yet poorly supported mental, emotional, and social aspects of breast implant removal. To address these unmet psychosocial needs, Dr. Savage Brown created Breast Implant Through Explant Inner Healing. I love that. The acronym for that is BRIGHT. I love that. It liberates women from society's quest for a better breast so they can bring their whole self forward as they choose to replace or remove aging or problematic breast implants and adjust to life after explant. It's the foundation for busting free, the first of its kind self-help book for women whose life journeys include breast implants. So I am so honored to have Dr. Amanda Savage Brown here with me, with her episode being titled, You're Defying the Breast Rule Book. What now? Oh my gosh, I can't wait for this conversation, but welcome, Dr. Amanda. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Marcy. I'm excited to be here and just want to say hi to the What Now tribe. And they're so lucky they have you. I've listened to so many of your episodes now, and you're just a fantastic podcast host. And I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And I didn't even have to pay her for that, guys. So thank you. Thank you for that. I just know that this is going to be such a treat for the tribe because you have got so much background and expertise, but you also have personal experience around this topic and conversation. Can you share more with the What Now tribe, what your experience in this going through the breakdown and really pushing through and getting your breakthrough around breast implants?
Sure. There's a couple of things that kind of go into it. So it's two women's stories, mine and my sister's, and I have full permission to always share hers as well. So, my sister is a breast cancer survivor, and she reconstructed with breast implants, and she's unpartnered, and so I companioned her through her entire journey, from diagnosis to you know moving on with her life and having the implants, and witnessing her journey really impacted me. It kind of removed the veil that I had over my eyes around breast cancer journeys. And I think that anyone who's been listening to the episodes that you've hosted the last several weeks, you have 3 women on there that are also breast cancer survivors. And so, just listening to them, you can also see how those journeys can go. And I know we're going to get into more of that. So just knowing that, my sister and I are super close, and that her journey is really intertwined and influenced mine as well. I got breast implants myself after heroically and perfectly nursing our youngest child. And though my breasts excelled at their job, I decided that they still needed to be fixed. And so, and I know that we have talked about that, or that came up in other episodes on your podcast. So I shockingly am still pretty surprised that I did it, but I did opt for breast implants. And I say I'm surprised because I intuitively kind of knew the body was never going to put out a welcome mat for 2 foreign objects. But I just hoped and was told that they were safe. And so I moved forward, kind of denying that intuition, and had breast implants for 12 and a half years. And during that time, during my tenure with breast implants, I changed a lot. I went back to graduate school. I got the 2nd degree so that I could be a psychotherapist, and really kind of transformed my own relationship with myself through that process, as many of us do. And so I just kind of started changing internally, and I was having a lot of the classic local problems with breast implants, and a lot of that hasn't really been discussed yet in this series. So I do want to just draw out, my breast implants were very, very cold, and that is very common but not often talked about. They did not move very much at all. I had capsular contracture, which is where that scar capsule just really tightens up. So they were uncomfortable, and they were basically something to look at but not touch. I didn't want a t-shirt to touch them, a bathing suit to touch them. I didn't want my daughter to touch them when we were snuggling. Hugs were compromised and ruined. And although they, quote, looked good, I did not show them off because I was changing, and I was worried about the message that having those in my body was sending to our older daughters. And I was also very concerned about being a self-acceptance specialist with women and sitting behind these 2 breast implants. So that's where I was with kind of these local and like private kind of, inner experiences with them. And I knew I didn't want to age with them, but I looked into, after my sister's breast cancer diagnosis, I thought, these got to go. They're impacting my mammograms, and I already have very dense breast tissue, which is also another thing that can reduce your mammogram's efficacy. And so I was like, these have to go. And I looked into explant, and it was 2014. And there was one terrifying picture online and not a lot of information. And I didn't want anything to do with that surgery. So I just clung to the original promises that they were lifetime devices, and that I could just kind of go along my life as long as I didn't have some like traumatic car accident. So I just kind of deal made with myself to tolerate the cold, unmoving implants in order to avoid that surgery. And then thankfully, one of them broke their promise. And even though they were gummy bear and supposed to always hold their shape, one of mine did rupture after a mammogram. And I noticed a sudden shape change, and it was kind of riding up my chest. And then I just used that as my change catalyst, and I moved through explant. And then this is where the rest of the personal and the professional journey comes together, is as I was going for explant consultations, I started being gaslit about something that I didn't even know existed. And I was being told by doctors that I shouldn't believe what I'd read on social media. I wasn't even on social media at that time. And that removing my breast implants would not make me feel any better. And I had not had those discussions with the doctors. I was there because they were old. One was climbing up my chest, and I just did not want to replace them. I didn't like living under what I call a surgery shadow, being very afraid of general anesthesia. I just didn't want to age and maybe be 60 or 70 and have to face removal of my breast implants at some point. So I became very concerned on those consultations as a women's health specialist, because I thought, what about the women who are coming for breast implant illness explant? What's happening to them? And I got very curious and I started looking into it. And then the world opened up for me. And I saw that there were hundreds of thousands of women on these journeys, many of whom were feeling that there was systemic health impacts. And I know that, you've done a great job covering that with your other guests. For me, when I found out about BII, I was rather skeptical about that being my story, because so many of the symptoms were non-specific. And I thought it was menopause, perimenopause. I thought it was aging. I thought I was just unlucky as hell, and that I just had a lot of joint pain, and that I just happened to have this disabling peripheral neuropathy in my upper body that was ruining my life. I just thought I was an unlucky woman. And I just never equated it to the fact that my body was very busy trying to keep me safe from the implants. That's its job. That's the immune system's job. And so I never connected those dots. And even after I learned about BII, I guarded against hope that explant would lead to feeling better. I didn't want to have dashed hopes.
Right. Especially from yourself, right? You don't want to put up those expectations and then come out of surgery and have everything be the same. I find it so interesting, because you're a very highly educated woman, and with your background in what your practice is all about, you were still able to be coerced by the doctors. You were still able to be pressured, right? And you yourself gave yourself the thought process of, well, maybe how I'm feeling is because of this. Maybe how I'm feeling is because of that, because it couldn't be my implants.
It never even occurred to me that it could be them, ever. I never made that connection, nor did any of my health providers over those 12 and a half years. When I look back, I started having a lot of systemic issues that I no longer have, but I was having a lot of health issues that, really perplexed some of my amazing health providers. And, my hormones were very disrupted, to the point that, given my age and level, that my doctor could not even map me on a table that was prognostic for how long would I be struggling with perimenopause and things like that. There was a reference table, and she had never seen someone so young with such depleted levels. And she never nobody had ever even asked me if I had implants. It just wasn't part of the conversation, And so for me, I moved forward with explant for all these other reasons. And within 3 weeks, I felt like somebody had plugged me back in. And I had forgotten that I was a feisty, lively, vivacious woman. And so within 3 weeks, I remembered who I was, and that had just, it was like this insidious decline. And so I'd forgotten about me. And then within 3 months of explant, it was a complete reversal of this disability, the peripheral neuropathy in my upper arms. It was completely gone. And it was shocking. I mean, I had the best medical care for that, and I was not getting better. All I was doing was getting worse. And explant, I never thought that those two were going to be related, and they were. And you can see me right now. I'm moving my arms. My life
all over the place.
Yeah, I don't have this, so that's that. Going through that and watching all the other women that were on their journeys and all of that stuff, I just started thinking, this is a really big deal in women's health. Millions and millions and millions of us get breast implants to augment, restore, or reconstruct our breasts. And then to loop back and to finish this, my breakthrough, when I started reading stories, accounts from women who had breast cancer, who endured the pain of expanders, only to end up having systemic problems or local problems, and then needing to explant to flat. I couldn't, I couldn't even speak about it for about 2 years without crying, because I'd witnessed my strong as hell sister weeping during her reconstruction process. And to imagine that, extrapolated to that population of women, and that they end up having to explant to flat. And so that became a passion place of mine. And the whole thing became a passion place of mine, where I started, and we're going to get into this conversation,
Yes.
but that's the breakthrough for me. Is I just decided, I got to do something about this. I've got to help as much as I'm able.
And that's why your voice is so powerful. It's not just, you've read other people's stories. It's not just that you're educated, around the social, emotional, all of the different psychological aspects of it, but you've experienced it for yourself, and you were able to put it all together, recognizing that women truly are getting sick from breast implants and they're not being heard from their doctors. And it really does go back to, a social problem that we have. So, I would love to know, how did your knowledge of language and cognition, and how us as humans are really wired for group belonging? We want to be accepted. We want to know that we're good enough and that people will see us and love us, right?
Yes.
How did this help you come up with the breast rule book? I love that, the breast rule book. I don't think anybody's probably really thought about it that way, but when you look at it, and after this conversation, people are going to be like, yeah, there's always been a breast rule book, and it has
Yes.
not always been kind. Most of the time, it is not kind to
Oh,
the
no.
women, that
Yeah.
have breasts. So
Yeah.
how did you come up with this plan and program to help us be liberated from all those rules?
Yeah. Well, I went to what I know. I am a acceptance and commitment practitioner, and that is highly evidence-based. It's had over 1,000 clinical trials looking at it, and it is what's known as transdiagnostic and process-based. So let me break that down. That's pretty clinical. So it just means that you can work with the 6 tenets of ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. You can work with those 6 tenets across all of human suffering. So whether that's childhood trauma or grief and loss, or a body acceptance issue, or people-pleasing behavior, whatever, it's effective. And it's also a little different in that, rather than psychopathologizing, rather than saying, if you're struggling with your thoughts or your feelings or painful memories or worries over the future, it must be because there's something wrong with you, and we need to give you medicine to fix that. What ACT does is it says these things are part of being human, and our response to them is where we have the opportunity. And so ACT is focused on improving what's called psychological flexibility. And so just like yoga improves your physical flexibility, ACT has these 6 processes that improves your psychological flexibility. And then there's this whole very complex underlying theory of ACT that we don't need to get into, but it looks at how humans suffer through language and cognition. So I'll just give you a brief example. If you have 2 pets, I have 2 cats. One of them is very, very fluffy and extraordinarily cute. The other one is also very fluffy, but just not as cute. His eyes aren't as big and round and Puss in Boots looking, right? They don't have language and cognition. The cats aren't wandering around. The one that it doesn't have the big, giant, wide eyes, he's not feeling less than. His mind isn't telling him that his eyes aren't big enough, his eyes aren't round enough, they aren't shaped the right way. He doesn't, the animals don't relate through that kind of symbolic meaning that humans do, right? So humans can care very much about things on a symbolic level. So if you do have a pet and it's used to the sound of you driving into your garage, it knows that sound and it equates that with you. If you do that in a old beater kind of car versus a hot off the press luxury car, that's not going to change your pet's reaction. It doesn't have that symbolic meaning, but your neighbors are going to notice the new luxury car and they might think differently about you. Their perception of you may change. And so what I did is I took everything that I learned from ACT and everything from that underlying theory that we're talking about, and I translated it specifically to this question of why did I, why do millions of women get breast implants? And how can we liberate ourselves from those inner processes that are with us long before an implant journey and stay with us until we die? And that's the truth of it, is these are just normal human processes. It's normal to compare yourself to other people. That's just a normal part of being a social creature. Years ago, it was adaptive. It let you know that you were bringing value to the group. So you weren't going to get kicked out and left to freeze or die or be eaten, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But in 2022, group comparison isn't just you and 10 people in your tribe, it's you and the world.
Yes.
Right? So this very normal human behavior, if done to an extreme, becomes unhealthy and unhelpful, right? And so when we take everything that we know about how the human mind works and we look at just the very normal stuff about group belonging, I developed that idea of the breast rule book. And do you want me to tell you a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead and tell us a little bit, and then we're going to dive into these amazing ladies. This last 6 episodes have just been awesome. And like you said, you have listened to every single one of them and really pulled out what really stood out to you that will help the What Now Tribe audience either navigate themselves or help someone that they love and care about. So yeah, please share a little bit about that.
So the breast rule book, I'll tell you what it is, and then let's jump in, like you're saying, and look for it in all those episodes. So the breast rule book is something, it's metaphorical for it's a vast network that your mind holds, my mind holds, every mind that grows up in a breast obsessed society. Without our permission or awareness, when you're very little, your mind just notices, you just observe that women have breasts. But your mind has a hobby, every mind has a hobby, to look at relationships in both directions. So when it learns, hey, you know what? Women have breasts. All by itself, your mind says, breasts are womanly. And then when you grow up in a society where they're sexualized, your mind learns breasts are sexy. Breasts make women confident, desirable, powerful. So it does its little hobby and it reverses it. And it also learns smaller breasts aren't sexy. And women without breasts aren't as powerful, confident, right? It learns that there's an ideal way for them to look. They should be symmetrical. They should be round, not tuberous. The nipples should have a certain size and placement, all of that stuff, right? And then your mind is doing its hobby. And because you're a human, it's comparing, how well do I measure up, right? So some people struggle with the breast rule book right from the get-go, depending on how their body naturally develops. And other people like me, I never struggled with it until I nursed. And then I had post-nursing breasts. And they violated the breast rule book.
that was me too. That was me too.
Yeah. And,
I have to interject something here though, that just popped into my head. We get it from our mothers too. We get it from
Mhm.
our grandmothers. And, my mother passed away young. And I know that if she was alive, she'd probably kick me in the rear for me saying this. But one of the things before she passed away is don't you dare forget to put my padded bra on.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
It just goes to show you
Brings
this
tears to
breast.
my eyes, actually.
Yeah, it is. In this breast rule book, it's not new. It's
No.
been around for the millennia. It is
Yes.
a very deeply ingrained and tightly held rule book. And, I'm going to, when it's right here, so I'm holding it in front of my face. So when this rule book is right in front of your face, everything that you do is filtered through it.
Yes.
So to your mom's point, the kind of bra you can buy, the how sexy you're allowed to behave, how you should feel about yourself, right? And so I think what would be helpful is if we go through and look at those 6 episodes and see just how pervasive this is and just how powerful it is, because that makes the case for why we really must learn how to liberate ourselves from it.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start with Heidi Brown. She was the, first interview that we did of the 6. And her episodes was all about planning her own funeral because she was so sick from these breast implants. So what really stood out to you in her experience and when she shared her story?
I loved Heidi's episode. First of all, I know Heidi, and she's
Hi,
she's a
Heidi. We love you.
she's a very sweet human.
Yes.
So I was smiling all through her episode and learned a lot more about her. But the things that stood out to me and where we can see the breast rule book, it's right at the beginning of her episode when she talks about why she got breast implants, right? And she talks about, well, we have to be balanced and proportioned. We can't have, here's a rule, your belly must not protrude further than your breasts. That's a rule, and there's of course the little quotation marks around these rules,
Of
but
course.
that's a rule, that women have a certain balance that we must achieve, a proportion that we must uphold, and I've had a lot of women, I used to do a what's your why interview when I was writing Busting Free, and I would have women fill out, well, what's your why? Why did you get breast implants? And why did you think you needed to do that? And it was a lot of women that said, I was trying to be more balanced. I would try on clothes and they would fit me waist down, but they wouldn't fit me waist up. And so I felt I was wrong, right? But those clothes are just being made according to the breast rule book, you
Mm.
know? So that really stood out to me about Heidi's episode for sure. Um, the other thing that stood out to me was this irony where Heidi mentioned that she got to the point where she wasn't showing them off,
Right.
you
So she
know?
wanted to be balanced, but then after she got them, she hid them.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah. And that I'm going to just get on my soapbox for a minute here, but we have lived with such standards about how we ought to look and appear and what we should do, injecting into our body, surgically altering our body, all of these things. And we have this double standard that we sure as hell better make it look natural and effortless, right?
Right. So go change yourself, but it better not look like you changed yourself.
Exactly, right? And we'll get to that when we get to Julie's episode, the last episode, because we'll see it
Yes.
again there. But so she was self-conscious, Heidi was self-conscious, and she was hiding them. They were, larger. Remember, she went for her second set and they were much larger than she wanted them to be. And then she felt like it almost like the proportions went into
An opposite, an
exactly,
extravagant upper. Yeah.
right? So there's this narrow window that where the rule book tells you've achieved that balance that we're supposedly supposed to have, so that really stood out to me from her episode. And then the other thing that, to finish up on hers, that really stood out to me given my work with women in this space is there was a really tender moment in her episode when she was talking to you toward the end, and she just shared and said, I don't think I've really fully processed all of this. And she said, I was so focused on feeling better and celebrating that I haven't really processed the rest.
Yeah,
And it's a lot to process.
it is.
And I've noticed this with women on these journeys that, it's easy to miss explants, what I call its hidden opportunity. If you explant and you end up pleased with your aesthetics, which Heidi is,
Oh,
if you
yes.
if you end up pleased with your aesthetics, you can just kind of be focused on that physical surgical journey and however you'd been impacted by them. And then you miss that opportunity to fully reclaim not just your body, but your heart and your mind from these things that we're talking about, right? Because once your mind learns something, so do you know what the color red is in Spanish? Do you know the word for that?
Roja.
Yeah. So when you learned rojo for red, you didn't forget red, right? You know both. Language is additive.
Yes.
So as women move through these journeys and we maybe learn, oh, breast implants aren't a panacea. Breast implants actually don't give me self-acceptance. Breast implants, whatever, you learn new things. It doesn't make you unlearn women have breasts. Breasts are sexy. There's an ideal way for them to look, right? And so the hidden opportunity on these journeys is for us to be able to acknowledge that those old unhelpful beliefs are going to rattle around in there and still show up to life, learn how to respond to that stuff differently so that we can be the woman that we want to be, no matter what our chest looks like. And that's the hidden opportunity is you can do that work so that you can move forward and just wait, ladies, till you start getting pushed around by the age rule book. It's an ass kicker, right?
Right. Yes, it is.
So, that's what you want to explant. Why not do the inner work? Why not learn how to use concrete skills so that you can respond differently to all this social programming in a way that liberates you so that you move forward on your terms?
Yes. I think that that's the part that's skipped. All of these women that we're talking about today, they all went through their experience of being so ill because of breast implants and then explanting and feeling so much better. And you rush into this. I've got to tell everybody else. I got to make sure all the other women know. And every single one of these ladies have become such amazing advocates without necessarily finishing up that self-healing so that they could be as strong as they possibly can to be able to help another woman walk through the complete process. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for what they've got going on inwardly. And I do know most of them personally. And so, over time and, with reflection, they're amazing and they've gotten to these places.
Yes.
My concern is, watching other women going through these journeys who kind of white knuckle their way through, maybe push themselves before they're ready, and then get to the other side. And if they didn't repair these inner processes, sometimes their mind convinces them that the only way to get relief is to get implants again. And I'm not indicting a woman for making that choice, but if your body has had a strong reaction to implants or your wallet cannot afford another go around, another set, and whatever it is, going back because you didn't, we repeat what we don't repair, right? And so if we don't do that inner repair, that's when we can see either maybe not as extreme as going back to getting more implants. And again, no judgment there, but we can see women continuing to suffer and feeling less than and not good enough and hiding and not going to the beach and not wearing their bathing suits and not feeling sexy when they're with their partner and they're having intimacy, right? And no one should live that way. That's not how anyone should be living post-explant,
Agreed. It's that acceptance crazy cycle. Right. And
Yeah.
I love what you said about how women, it's like sometimes they get so frustrated and they don't know how to accept themselves because of society's acceptance of breasts. And so they do think about getting another set of implants, where if they would just hesitate and pause and take a breath and do that inner work, like you said, and heal what's broken there,
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
just everything comes together beautifully when you know who you are and that you are fully and absolutely beautifully made.
Yeah. And to just reclaim yourself from these processes that are very normal when you grow up in a breast obsessed society. It's there's just normal processes, but that doesn't mean you have to follow them. Just because it's in your mind, just because you have a thought, doesn't mean you have to do it. You know what I mean? They're
Yes.
thoughts. They're
Yes.
just little blips of energy in your mind. You
You
don't
know,
have to follow them.
this is a great time for us to just kind of do just a little PSA for mamas out there. Hey, mamas, if you've got little girls that are watching you, or just know that there are little girls watching you, we can help change this. We can help change this for the next generations. They don't have to
Yes,
base their value off of their boobs, because
that's right.
boobs are not what make them important. I love that.
Absolutely
Okay,
not. And it's an opportunity to model for your daughter genuine self-acceptance,
yes.
and we can talk more about that after we get through their
I
episode.
know we got a few people here to talk about. So let's jump into Terry Diaz. Her story about living with consequences, talking about what she went through after getting her implants. I mean, because she was a very healthy woman too, and a
Mhm.
mama and all of that, and the consequences that she experienced because of her choice.
Yeah, yeah. And what stood out to me about Terry's episode, because again, we're looking for where did the breast rule book come into play? And again at the beginning of our episode, I loved it because you just set this stuff up on a tee for me. But you were asking, well, why did you do it? And she was sharing her story that she got to a place in her life where she was working on fitness, feeling her best, looking her best, and her mind said, I'll accept those breasts. I'm pretty sure hers was post nursing as well, right?
Yes, they were.
And so, I also loved how Terry went into she really talked about when you're going on those consults for breast augmentation or restoration, how, you try on the bra and you've got those implants, the display implants, and you see yourself under the shirt and, you see all these before and after pictures. And wow, that is some powerful stuff. When the human mind starts seeing something like that, when you see, oh, I'm doing something that's narrowing the gap between the breast rule book and my own appearance, that becomes the words appetitive from a behavior perspective. And that means you want to pursue it. You want to go for it. And so you start to see breast implants in this it's a source of relief. It's going to ease that inner pain of feeling not good enough, of feeling less than. And that's what she was saying that she was feeling about herself with respect to that part of her body. And again, we saw that whole irony of her story that even though on the pre-surgery side, there was this is going to lead me to feel better about myself. It's that sad, tragic irony whenever, and she said, initially that they did, that you wake up and you're like, wow. But over time, rather than feeling better, she felt so incredibly unwell. Her story with BII is very, very intense,
It
and
really is.
so that's what stood out to me is that she was talking about that whole, where did it come from? The marketing, the constant messaging, all of that stuff. And I call it the panacea of promises that we're told about breast implants.
Yes. And one of the rules that you mentioned is the bigger is better.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you said that because Terry was the first one that we heard about waking up with implants that were considerably larger than she
Huge.
agreed to,
Huge.
right?
Oh, yes.
And that is the breast rule book at play in your doctor's mind.
Wow.
So it isn't just women who hold the breast rule book, anyone. So our partners, our doctors, our nurses, everybody's got this breast rule book. And so the doctors, when they're like, whoa, wait, why do I have a double D when I asked for a sporty C? And the doctors say, well, it's just that everybody ultimately really wants them to be bigger, because that's rule number 2 in the breast rule book. Rule number 2 is bigger is better, right? We're going to get into rule number 1 with the next few episodes, but yeah,
it's crazy. It is. I mean, I know that I had even mentioned, I think on this episode, that I was concerned about being attractive to my husband afterwards, not knowing what size breasts I was going to have after I explanted. And
yeah.
it's a real thing. And so I am so glad that you're talking on this in this book. I can't wait for you to share more about the book because it is unique. It is such a beautiful book and guide. So, okay, so let's get into these ladies that also, whether they had breast cancer before and it was part of their reconstruction, like Robin Tout's story. I love her. Her title is just the best, though. Being flat chested and alive
Mm-hmm.
is so powerful
Mm-hmm.
because she had that flexibility in her mindset, in her psychology, like you were mentioning, to be
Mm-hmm.
able to think that it's like, you know what? My boobs don't make me.
No, I know. The 3 episodes with the breast cancer patients are powerful, and they bring up so much stuff about how pervasive and powerful the breast rule book is. So rule number one is women have breasts, right? And so when you have breast cancer and it leads to double mastectomy, right now, the default pathway, as 2 of your guests, I think actually all 3 of them talked about, there's this fast period where there's this team, it's assembled, and there's this path that's laid before you, and it is a path of reconstruction with implants. Maybe a discussion on you could do flap reconstruction, but it's pretty much this faster path, and then all the callous things that can be said to women in that position, of, oh, well, you're getting a free boob job. No, you're not. That's just not appropriate to say to women who are going through that experience. But the breast rule book emboldens all people, to say things to these women. You're too young to not have breasts, as if her breasts are going to matter less to her over time. It's so they're well-meaning. They're trying to say things. You won't be happy without them, all of that stuff. But it all comes from the breast rule book, and everyone gripping to it so tightly that they fail to see that sitting in front of them is a woman who is facing potential loss of a body part, a highly sexualized body part. And you should watch what you say to her, because we don't have a delete button, right? So once something gets in our mind, it tends to rattle around in there, which can then show up in painful ways for them when it comes time to explant. And Robin's story is outstanding because that wasn't her experience, right? Robin, she's got an interesting relationship with the breast rule book, and I love these women that pursue these options, because I tell them, you've just got a natural higher psychological flexibility around this. This journey, maybe you naturally had it going into it, or this journey delivered you to it, but hats off, when you go through this journey and ultimately you end up explanting to flat.
Yeah. And not just explanting to flat, but then going and helping other women understand that this is truly a very valid option for them.
Yes.
When doctors don't talk about it, and when a woman brings it up and they want to do it, and they get, dissuaded by the doctor saying, but you're not going to feel right. You're not going to look right. You're not going to be normal. And you're going to be back in my office asking for implants if you do this.
And then to further look at just how powerful the breast rule book is, there's a thing called flat denial, where a woman may go into a doctor and she has chosen for her mastectomy, post-mastectomy option, I would like to be flat. And she'll choose her scar pattern, and it will all be agreed upon, and she'll wake up and there is extra skin left behind just in case she changed her mind. And that is a total violation of a woman's autonomy of her body. And it is very paternalistic, right? And so flat denial comes 100% from over identification, rigidly gripping the breast rule book, not by the woman asking for it, but by her healthcare team,
Wow.
And the other thing about this area of women's health is that reconstruction with implants, flap reconstruction, totally covered by insurance. But I was just at a retreat for aesthetic flat closure, where the New York senator was there and all fired up and sharing with us that they had just gotten it passed that paying for aesthetic flat closure was now also going to be legally required in that state. And why isn't it like that across the board? Outstanding that that's happening there. And she kept saying, if it can happen in New York, it can happen anywhere. And I'm looking forward to that. But I just want to highlight how much that illustrates the breast rule book. Women have breasts, to the point that breast cancer patients were having to pay if they wanted aesthetic flat closure.
Wow, that's amazing. And kudos to New York for that law. That's amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
So Roger Bannister has just been created in the flat closure arena. So let's follow suit, all the other states, right? So
Yes.
let's go ahead. Let's add in Roxanne Vermeland and Andrea Otiano's stories, because both of them, they have such unique stories, both of them, and they are both also currently still in treatment for cancer. And so we're definitely praying for both of them and
Yeah.
all the women that are suffering with breast cancer and treatment. I would
Yes.
definitely.
Absolutely. I didn't know the extent of Roxanne's story. I do know Andrea. So, listening to those, I mean, at one point I was driving in my car listening to Roxanne's story with my hand over my mouth. Just, I couldn't believe everything. And, what I took from those episodes, really from looking at the breast rulebook perspective, it's just, let's just pause and step back for a second and look at how much symbolic meaning has been ascribed to this body part. So much so that we live in a society where our breasts can be surgically augmented, restored, reconstructed with devices that are temporary, problem prone, and inappropriately studied, and can lead unbelievably to breast implant associated cancer. If you just step back and look at what I just said, it's a mouthful, but if you really just step back and look at it, you could see that this breast rulebook, these are very deeply ingrained, very serious rules. We don't do that with any other body part, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And
Yeah.
getting back to this, like, let's take a pause. That pause also needs to happen in that treatment room when a woman has been diagnosed. It's like, hey, let's take a breath.
Yes.
Let's let the woman take a breath and
Let's let
kind
the
of
woman,
understand what's even happening
yes.
before
Let's
we
let her
start
take
pushing.
a breath. Let's let her know about 4 options. She can reconstruct with implants. She can do a flap reconstruction. She can do Goldilocks, and she can do aesthetic flat closure. And all 4 of those should be given to her. And she should be given sacred time where she gets to go and connect with other women who have walked those walks and lived those paths and can talk with her, because that is very important to our nervous system as women. We want to affiliate with other women who know our distress.
Yes.
And in giving women, breast cancer women, that option, that time, so that they can connect with others around all 4 options, and not have that conveyor belt feeling that all of your guests described.
Yeah, well, they were out of control. They had absolutely no ownership in what the next step was for them.
Wow.
Other than Roxanne and Andrea, such strong women being their own advocates, fighting for the treatments that they had found out about, that they desired, and finding doctors that would work with them, That's such powerful, powerful messages there.
So
But
amazing.
it's really interesting about the breast implant associated cancers. Basically, these are man-made cancers. These are cancers that come, I mean, how else can Andrea end up with a cancer that is only found in older men? Andrea's a woman, by the way, and older men that have worked in like the airline industry and are exposed to the highly toxic jet fuel on a daily basis, none of which Andrea has had. But she did have implants that
Mhm.
had, over 37 toxic chemicals inside of them that were leaching out into her body. That's how it happened. That's the importance of these episodes. That's the importance of this advocacy and the voices that are sharing their stories.
Mhm.
And it's such a big deal when the legislation does not support the women in their personal choice
Yeah.
when it
Yeah.
comes to how they want to be
And
treated.
again, all that legislation has all been built upon the breast rule book. I
Yeah.
mean, the breast rule book has defined the legislation, you know.
And there's no age to that breast rule book, as we're getting into the sixth and the final episode that we're going
Oh
to be
my
talking
gosh.
about with Julie Christie. Oh my gosh, 17 and asymmetrical breasts, meaning one breast was about two sizes bigger than the other one. In her story, she talks about how it was never a problem to her. She never thought there was anything wrong until she went to a doctor on a regular visit and they input their opinion about what was normal and how she could be fixed.
Yeah. That
Ah!
that doctor was like, oh wait, look, the breast rule book right here, number 3, breasts should be symmetrical,
Ugh.
right? And you know, that's what was given to this poor 17-year-old. We are highly suggestible. We are highly sensitive to labels, you know. And the thing that stood out to me about her episode, again, and we mentioned this at the beginning, was, you know, this no one will know. You won't be able to tell. No one will ever know. And she talked about the whole time that she had it, this great concern that people would notice, that it was obvious, and it gets back to that whole thing of, you know, in pursuit of narrowing that gap between how we are and the breast rule book. We need to be able to do it in a way that is so natural, that no one knows. And that to me is just so unbelievably ironic, which is part of why I am trying to come forward and talk as openly, non-judgmentally, without stigmatizing, without indicting any woman for any decision that she's made. We need to be able to openly talk about the societal pressures that lead us onto the implant table and talk with one another about it, help each other start catching these things. Because once you see one rule book, you can start seeing all the others. And all I do is work with women. And let me tell you, our life is filled with them. We've got the mom rule book, the age rule book, your hair rule book, your skin rule book, the thigh, the lip, the eyebrows. I mean, it's just so many, right? And there's nothing wrong with wanting to look your best so long as you aren't putting yourself at risk, so long as you aren't going beyond your financial abilities, so that you understand what you're doing and so that you're not violating any of your values. Me getting breast implants, I violated some values that I held around self-care and authenticity and the non-objectification of women.
Right. Well, and it also, a lot of it comes along with being aware, because so many of us, I mean, I would say that every woman that's gotten implants has really been ignorant around what the potential, outcome can be. We
Mhm.
romanticize what it's going to be like before we go under the knife and have those implants put in, and that we're going to just come out and we're going to be perfect and beautiful. But we don't have any clue because nobody's ever told us how dangerous they are, what it can lead to, what it can cause, and what life will be like. And it can shorten our lives.
That was another really good point that Terry Diaz made, is that they're often presented to us sort of like coloring your hair, getting your nails done, or, you know, a cosmetic tattoo or whatever. It's without really informing the women, educating them that this is a surgery, and most often it's going to cut into your pectoralis major muscle. You're going to have scars, you're going to have these internal scars, and no, all of that. It's pitched as this easy peasy, get it and forget it thing. When in reality we see that it impacts us much more deeply physically. And then from where I'm concerned, it impacts us to our core in terms of how we see ourselves, feel about ourselves, and how we move forward, especially with explant, getting yourself through the reveal, post-explant intimacy. I go through it all the time with my post-explant chest. If I'm going to wear a really nice dress, they're all made for someone who's got really different proportions than I do, and they don't fit me. If you want a cocktail dress or you want to be doing something formal, those dresses aren't meant for us.
Right. That's where we need to go and find someone that's, a really great dressmaker and have them start a new line. And it could be a really big deal. It could be a big thing for sure. And one of the things I would like for us just to really talk about quickly is the society's pressure to be a certain way puts it into women's minds to do whatever it takes to fit in and to fit that mold.
Yes. And then we don't question where all that came from. It's put into our minds without our awareness or permission. And a lot of times it's our very own mind, because of its little hobbies, that does it all by itself. It just derives these things. And then we just treat them. I used to love it. I would do these interviews with women. What's your why? Why did you think that? When did you learn that? And they would all sit there very quietly. And I would watch her, and I talk about this in the book, Busting Free. I'd watch her, and she would sit there and kind of look around, and I would see almost like the little girl that she once was, and kind of her wondering, wait, how did this happen to me? How did I actually, we can point to Cosmo, or we can point to, Pamela Anderson, but it's before then, and it's deeper, and it isn't just about our breasts. And so when you really gently create a safe space and ask a woman, and how did you learn that needed to be fixed about you, whatever it is, deep down, she's like, I don't know, like, when was that taken from me? And that's why I talk so much about, I intentionally use the word reclaiming. Reclaiming means you're taking back something that was lost, and that you recognize that it can be lost or taken from you again, right? Because just because you go through this journey, it doesn't mean that you're lifted out of this society. You continue to be exposed to messaging about how you come up short and how you're not good enough and what you need to do to be better. You cannot leave your house. You can't look at your phone without that messaging coming at you. No. You can't watch TV. You can't go to a store, And so when you ask a woman, how did this happen? It helps her get to a compassionate place where she sees, this isn't that I'm weak or I'm vain or I'm, whatever. This was something that I didn't even know I was going through, And then once she has that awareness, she opens herself up to be able to change.
Yes, that's beautiful. That's awesome. So what tips would you have for women that may currently have implants, maybe considering getting implants, or maybe somebody that just knows somebody and loves somebody that has implants? Now that they've heard these episodes, they've heard what you've had to say about them. What can they do to help either themselves or the people that they care about?
I think that's a really important question. The answer is a little different if you have implants right now and you've been listening to these episodes. And to those members of the What Now tribe, I want to say, don't panic. Just don't panic. You hear this kind of stuff, and it can lead your mind to go to a pretty emotional place where you maybe feel threatened. Maybe you're wondering what this means for you, and And then the problem solving mode of mine takes over. And it's like, oh my gosh, we've got to do something about this. We've got, and then I have seen women who will do Google overload. They'll, really get a lot of this information and they will just take off and they go really, really fast and they rush through these. These are very tender, thoughtful and soulful journeys, and so my recommendation is don't panic, and then I talk about in Busting Free, the book that I wrote for women on these journeys, I talk about practicing the ABCs of acceptance, and being able to accept this is my reality. I have breast implants in my body and there's a lot of things coming forward. The FDA put a boxed warning on them. We know that there's some, breast implant associated cancers, and there's a lot of women talking about systemic decline and then recovery with explant. And so that just kind of accepting that reality and then doing the ABCs of acceptance. So acknowledge how that leads you to feel. That's the A. Acknowledge if that leads you to feel scared, concerned, if it leads you to feel angry, if it leads you to feel defensive, it's okay. You just let those feelings come, stay, and go on their own. And the B is kind of breathe your way through it and attune into your body. If you're feeling very anxious and your nervous system's interpreting this as a threat, you're going to want to do things to soothe that part of you and use that body connection, breathe, do the things you can to ground yourself. And then C is companion yourself through this. And to summarize that, it's if you were going to go on a journey with somebody, a journey that might be tough or scary or could change your body, or if you were choosing somebody to go on that journey with you, what kind of companion would you choose? You wouldn't choose someone who's talking really mean to you. You wouldn't choose someone who's always doing doom and gloom and scaring the shit out of you. You know what I mean? You would choose a companion that wasn't controlling and fear-mongering. You would choose a companion that was kind, respectful, compassionate, supportive, and had your back, right? So kind of deciding what kind of woman do I want to be? If I've got breast implants in my body, how do I want to treat myself? And being curious, that's another way to think of the C and the ABCs here. Be curious, learn, educate yourself, connect with breast implant safety groups, go to the Breast Implant Health Summit website and look at that research. That's research that doesn't have any kind of conflict of interest. Those presenters didn't have things that they needed to disclose. Read their research, look at it, and just get the information for yourself. And then decide, are there things I want to do to be safer while they're in my body? Or, oh my gosh, are these way past due? Do I need to learn and educate myself about safely removing them? And then just really having your back as you go through that whole thing, That's what I would recommend is don't panic and just show up for yourself as you're going through this and deciding how you're going to navigate it and the kind of woman that you want to be, before, during, and after explant.
Absolutely. And then for someone that maybe doesn't have the implants, but knows someone that they love, how can they breach this topic? How can they share this information?
Yeah, I actually just wrote a blog on that. And so they can go to my website, which is amandasavagebrown.com. And my blog has, an entry on how to talk to someone that you love about this, because it's very different than talking to somebody about quitting smoking or talking to somebody about, maybe you need to go see a doctor for this or that. It's a touchy subject, and because of the breast rule book, women's minds can be pretty defended against doing something that threatens that or violates it, right? And so, I suggest taking the mindset, be a farmer, not a marionette. You want to plant seeds, help people be aware without a hidden agenda of trying to control somebody else's decisions and what they're going to do. These are nuanced journeys, and women need to be supported to move through them as best as they're able. And different things are important to different women on these journeys, and, I feared surgery. I had to really come to terms with my fear of surgery. That's not a problem for other women. Some other women are really worried about, well, what's my partner going to think, or maybe it affects their income. I have lots of women who have talked with me about, this is an important part of how I make money,
Right.
And so our place isn't to judge one another. It's to just give information and say, I'm here for you. I'm here for you.
Yeah, that's good. And I think that just being educated themselves so that when the opportunity arrives, they know where to point,
Yeah.
right? They know where to share information
Yeah.
on the topic. So
Yeah.
good. Well,
Yeah.
you have been absolutely amazing. And I have really enjoyed this conversation. And I know that the audience is going to too. It's like, what now, tribe? Please take the time. If you haven't listened to the other episodes, you really want to go back and listen, whether you are a man, a woman, or whatever. Let's just say that people that have implants, and there's the potential that one of these stories could really impact that person you care about and help them as they move forward in their journey because they may be feeling great right now. I did for over a decade.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the last, decade plus that I had my implants that I really went downhill. And so maybe you could be the one that shares this story. So please listen, please share these, please go and give a 5-star review and write me a review because that helps get more eyes on these episodes. But Dr. Amanda, before we go, is there anywhere else that you would like to have people connect with you or follow you? And where can they get your book?
There's my book. So yes, so pretty much using my name is the best way. So my website's amandasavagebrown.com. So if you find your way to amandasavagebrown.com, from there, you're going to find tons of open source, freely shared, unique resources that focus on the inner parts of these journeys. It's agenda free. I'm not trying to convince anyone to do anything in a certain specific way. So if you just want to know how to steady yourself because you feel overwhelmed, if you want to help yourself holistically prepare for explant, for those difficult conversations. Maybe you lied to your kids and now they're 20 something and you've got to get your breast implants removed. That's awkward. You need to think about how you're going to navigate that. So I've got something there for you. There's a blog and then the entire online resource library for Busting Free. I made it open resource, open share. It's click and play because I want women to have it. And so there's no email gatekeeping. You can even type in bustingfreeonline.com and it'll take you to 30 guided audios. I do think they're better if you have the context of the book, but you can still listen to those and they will help you build the practice of being able to stay present instead of thinking about those painful memories, maybe when you were ridiculed over how your breasts looked or didn't look, or fearing how you're going to look in the future. There's a lot of guided audios to teach you how to stay present. There's guided audios to help you look at your full experience with breast implants, dropping judgment, and not having that breast rule book right on top of you. And there's so many exercises in there for self-compassion and acceptance. And, it really teaches you how to go from, wouldn't that be nice to have self-acceptance, to I've made this into a verb. It's something I do and I know how to do it. I can't stand when therapists are like, you just need to love yourself, but they don't tell you how to go about doing that. So all of that is there. So amandasavagebrown.com. You can follow me on Instagram or Facebook at Dr. Amanda Savage Brown. Yeah. And then Busting Free is available on Amazon. And it really is a companion. Like reading it doesn't mean that you are explanting imminently. And you can also read it way after explant. It's sort of like that What to Expect When You're Expecting book, how it's like a companion book for your entire journey. That's how I wrote Busting Free, is you can dip into inner healing and reclaiming yourself long before explant, and you can do it long after. you know. I just don't think that women should have to white knuckle their way through these journeys, you know.
No. Agreed, 100%. And what's beautiful is that you can take what you learn in Busting Free and apply it to the other rule books that you have going on in your life too that
Mm,
are
I
not
use it.
serving you, not
Yep,
serving you.
I
But oh
use
my
it all
gosh,
the
Dr.
time.
Amanda, thank you so much for being the most amazing, amazing guest today with your episode being you're defying the breast rule book. What now? Thank you so much. I
Thank
appreciate
you,
you.
Marcy. Take care.